Over the years, sports have been a mainstay of society all around the world and have always been growing. In the beginning, sports were a different and unique form of entertainment. It was really a live action show for nobility or powerful individuals to spectate for their pleasure. For that reason, sports have always had an underlying connection with politics. While sports today are seen as more of their own thing, there are still situations that happen all over the world that show that sports are still a place where politics influence. Take the Olympics, for example, the biggest sporting event in the world that comes every 4 years and invites every country in the world. The Olympics is a competition to symbolize unity and peace through all the regimes in the world. However, what if a country doesn't want to portray that? Sometimes countries can use sports events to disperse their own political agenda. And when the politics of a certain region may be deadly, there's a chance it may bleed into the sports world itself. This is a story about a horrific scene and about how deadly grudges of politics can insert themselves into sports and create tragedies, like the 1972 Munich Massacre. The Olympics have always been seen as a way for the world to come together for friendly competition and unity. However, sometimes the Olympics serve more as a propaganda machine for countries and their regimes to get their message across. The 1972 Olympics was very much that at the time for West Germany, the host of the event. The last time Olympics were held on German soil was in 1936, and was an event for the leader of Germany at the time, Adolf Hitler, to present his Nazi ideologies.
At the 1936 Olympics, held in Nazi Germany just 36 years earlier, Hitler used the event as a propaganda machine to demonstrate the superiority of the Aryan race.
At the Olympics, Hitler paraded around the Nazi flag and had military demonstrations in a way that many believe was his own way of showing the world what he was capable of. Just 5 years later, the Germans would invade the countries of Europe, and one of the biggest tragedies and disgusting acts would begin with the Holocaust. The somewhat recently formed West Germany were using the 1972 Olympics as a way of redeeming themselves from their ugly past and display back in 1936. They even deemed the 1972 iteration of the Olympics as the Olympics of Peace and Joy.
Munich, 1972. By hosting the Summer Olympics, Germany wanted to show the world that it was a cheerful, colorful, cosmopolitan country, and that it had overcome the shadows of its Nazi past.
It would also be a substantial moment for Israel, who would send their Olympic team in which had survivors or even close relatives of survivors of the Holocaust, which ended only 27 years prior.
They wanted to show the least militaristic, most peace-loving Germany possible, and this meant a deliberate lack of security. Although there were some unarmed security officers, not a single uniformed police officer or soldier was anywhere in sight. The attendance of the Israeli team at this event, only 27 years after the Holocaust, cannot be understated. The Israeli athletes, many of whom lost relatives in the Holocaust, waved the Israeli flag over German soil only 6 miles from the Dachau concentration camp. Israel was making a strong statement of both Jewish resilience and Israel's readiness to accept a different Germany.
The security of the 1972 Olympics was very lax, with West Germany wanting to put on an event that was completely opposite of their prior one in 1936. They only spent less than $2 million on security. The majority of security personnel were unarmed guards that were meant to deal with drunk fans rather than full-blown militant individuals. The Olympic Village, where all athletes participating stayed, was only surrounded by a 2-meter fence and no other security measures. With the lack of security, there were many that warned West Germany of the potential risks associated with it. West German authorities hired a forensic scientist to assess these risks.
Before the games began, West German authorities hired a forensic psychologist, Dr. Georg Sieber, to assess possible threats on the village and outline worst-case scenarios. Sieber came up with a list of 26 possible security threats to the games, and number 21 on his list predicted the events leading up to the Munich Massacre almost exactly. Sieber's Situation 21 outlined an event where Palestinian terrorists broke into the Olympic Village, killing and taking hostages from the Israeli quarters and using them to demand the freeing of political prisoners.
The organizers received information from Sieber, as well as possible solutions to a potential targeted attack, but did not pursue any of them. Other countries, including Israel, were also concerned with the security measures, but went along with the event as planned anyway. And with the new and exciting image that West Germany wanted to project to the world, and the courage of the athletes of Israel in attending the event, it would all go unbelievably up in smoke when a terrorist group named Black September would put an end to the Olympics of peace and joy and commit one of the biggest atrocities in sports and in world history. Situation 21. At the time, the motives of the Palestinian terrorist organization named Black September were very clear to the world. There have long been deadly conflicts between many of the countries within the Middle East, including Palestine, Israel, and others. However, in 1949, a new era of Palestine would begin shortly after a conflict with Israel.
Israel and Palestine had been in conflict for years, and there was no clear end in sight. Following the Israeli War of Independence in 1949, Palestinians lost their homeland to Israel. In retaliation, the Palestinian Authority president Yasser Arafat formed and led the Fatah, a political and military organization whose goal was to regain control of Palestine.
The Fatah, or Al-Fatah, would later be rebranded as the PLO, or Palestinian Liberation Organization, and they would gain refuge in the country of Jordan. The PLO's mission was to regain their homeland as well as completely eradicate Israel. In Jordan, about 2/3 of the population became Palestinian over the years. However, Jordan's King Hussein would drastically change their relationship in 1970. King Hussein was not very approving of the war Palestinians drug his country into in 1967 against Israel, and he was also not very happy about the idea of continuing to let Palestine attack Israel from the country of Jordan. So, Jordan would wage a civil war with the residing Palestinians, which would be dubbed Black September. The war would see up to 15,000 Palestinians killed and entire cities turned to rubble, like in the city of Amman.
Like someone recovering from a dreadful accident, the people of Amman are making their first faint signs of normal behavior. Uncollected rubbish is being burned in the streets, and a general cleaning up operation started. The guerrillas claim the army hasn't kept its part of the Cairo bargain. They say it's searching houses for guerrillas, arresting suspects, and refusing to free captured guerrillas. And they accuse the army of trying to liquidate them by police methods where they failed by force. So far from expressing satisfaction that peace is now settled on this battered city, some guerrilla leaders say that there's a distinct possibility of another clash.
After losing this conflict, a part of the PLO would splinter out into a new group, who named themselves after the tragic Civil War. This new group was much more radical and even more dangerous. While the PLO attempted to have some form of structure within the worlds and their governments, Black September was a group of pure anarchy and violence and what they deemed as vengeance against Jordan and Israel. They were suspected of many attacks, including the assassination of a Jordanian prime minister, but also sending letter bombs to Israel embassies across the world, hijacking of a Belgian aircraft, and sabotaging a German electric plant as well. While the group was separated from PLO, they still had connections with the original president of PLO and Al-Fatah, Yasser Arafat, who would even approve of their next big atrocity at the Olympic Games.
The first week of the 1972 Olympics went according to plan. It seemed Germany might successfully rehabilitate their tarnished legacy, but everything took a tragic turn very early on September 5th. At 4:33 in the morning, 8 Black September members scaled the 2-meter fence surrounding the Olympic Village. Armed with duffel bags of weapons and using stolen keys, they entered the apartments where the Israeli national athletes were housed on the first floor of 31 Connolly Strauss.
8 members of Black September were dressed in tracksuits to fit in with the athletes in the Olympic Village. As the attackers broke into the building, the wrestling referee Yusuf Gutfreund heard the commotion and investigated outside his room. Upon seeing the attackers, Gutfreund was subdued, but made sure to alert everyone in the building of the attackers' presence. Moshe Weinberg, the Israeli wrestling coach, was the first one to be alerted and went to confront the attackers, but was instantly shot and held at gunpoint by the terrorists. They demanded that Weinberg show them where the rest of the Israelis were, and thus he led them to where 6 other members of the Israeli team were fast asleep. The attackers rounded up the sleeping individuals in the room and went back to go to apartment 1 of the building. During that trip, Weinberg sought another chance to charge the attackers, however, was shot dead. Yosef Romano, an Israeli weightlifter who was wounded and on crutches at the time, joined the attack against the terrorists and was also shot dead. Authorities would find Weinberg's body in the street and would later find Romano's body after he was mutilated and castrated by the terrorists in front of the other hostages. After the 2 slain Israeli competitors, Black September would amass 9 Israeli hostages and demand negotiation with government officials.
The terrorist group's leader, Lutif Afif, also known as Isa, initiated contact with the German police at 5:08 a.m. via a 2-page letter that listed their demands. The letter threatened that 1 hostage would be executed each hour if the demands were not met.
The demands of Black September was the release of 234 Palestinians who were held in prison over in Israel, as well as 2 German terrorists being held in West Germany. They threatened that if their demands were not met, they would kill one of the hostages every hour starting at 9 a.m., although they would continually push back the deadline. Germany and the Olympic Committee's efforts and responses to this act can only be described as horrendous. Alarms would be raised shortly after the terrorists were settled into an apartment with the 9 Israeli hostages. Yet, the Olympic Committee refrained from suspending the games.
After learning of the attack, Avery Brundage, then president of the Olympics Committee, declared that the games must go on. And in typical German precision, the first athletic event of the day occurred at exactly 8:15 a.m. as 2 Israelis lay dead and 9 Israelis were held hostage. Brundage spent his day exerting pressure on German officials to get the Israelis out of the village and allow the Olympics to carry on in peace. As the other athletes were sunbathing and playing ping pong, an international nightmare lasting more than 20 hours was happening just a few yards away. Finally, 10 hours later at 3:51, the Olympics Committee finally suspended the events. Thousands of people filed out of the Olympic stadiums and gathered on the grassy hill overlooking the apartments, along with live television crews.
From today's perspective, that's really hard to imagine, that the games were carrying on in the stadium at the same time as there was this hostage crisis just hundreds of meters away. There was a dead athlete lying in one of the apartments there in Munich, a few hundred yards from where the games were continuing.
The blunders of the German government in this situation would soon begin. The Germans did not have a dedicated anti-terrorism force and rejected the help of outside help in this matter. With Israel maintaining the stance that they would not negotiate with the terrorists, the head of Munich police, as well as the Libyan and Tunisian ambassadors to Germany, would head the negotiations. Part of the negotiations included an offer to Black September of an unlimited amount of money, as well as another offer substituting German officials for the Israeli hostages. Black September denied all these offers and were not interested in any money. With the world's eyes on how Germany would respond to the crisis through TV, they failed tremendously, especially with their first botched rescue attempt.
We see the footage of the police on the rooftops coming closer and closer, and they're dressed like athletes. So in case they're seen, it just looks like they're athletes on the roof. Why there would be athletes on the roof, I don't know. But then at a certain point, we realize that the Palestinians can see them on television and that the Germans have forgotten to tell the television stations to stop filming.
So the terrorists knew about the cameras. They knew there were snipers getting in position and were able to react to that information.
The first attempt failed miserably. and negotiations broke down about 20 hours into the situation. Black September had a new demand. They wanted a flight to Cairo, Egypt, with the hostages. Upon learning this, the Germans accepted the deal and crafted a new plan to ambush the group at the airport. At this point, the hostages were revealed to be tortured, beaten, and even castrated during that 20-hour time span with the terrorists. The Germans would get a bus that would transport the attackers to a helicopter to take them to Fürstenfeldbruck Air Base, just 15 miles away. The ambush was being prepared as the terrorists landed at the airport, and only chaos would ensue. With undermanned, undertrained, and under-equipped members of the Munich police force being tasked with the mission, it was another extreme failure.
6 policemen, disguised as flight crew, were placed on the airplane, and 5 sharpshooters lay on the perimeter. At the last minute, though, the flight crew voted to abandon their mission without consulting Central Command and just left the plane. The remaining 5 sharpshooters had no special sniper training, no radio communication, and no telescopic or infrared sights, which, if you've watched any TV or movies in the last, 50 years, you know are pretty crucial to the job of a sniper.
The terrorist group leader, Issa, would board the plane first and immediately be thrown off on the fact that the plane was completely empty and would run out of the plane and warn the others of the trap. The terrorists and German police officers alike would start a shootout. In that time, the terrorists made sure that the Israeli hostages would not make it out alive.
The German version of what happened, amidst heavy local criticism, came at a 4-hour news conference chaired by Bruno Merck, the state's Minister of the Interior. Through an interpreter, the death of the hostages was explained.
Lança une grenade à l'intérieur de cet hélicoptère.
At 4 minutes past midnight, one terrorist got out of the helicopter, which was standing on the right side, seen from the tower, and took out a hand grenade and threw it towards the helicopter and then moved backwards.
Hans-Dieter Genscher, the Federal Minister of the Interior, had taken charge of the unsuccessful diplomatic negotiations. And Dr. Manfred Schreiber, Munich's police president, drew up the airport ambush plan that failed.
In totality, 5 of the terrorists were gunned down, while 1 of the German police officers were killed as well. Yet, all 9 Israeli hostages were killed either by the grenade that the terrorists threw at the helicopter or were shot by the terrorists themselves. In total, 11 Israeli athletes were killed on that day, and the 3 remaining terrorists were captured by German authorities. The aftermath of the event is even more shocking as details and accusations come forward. However, first, with 3 terrorists in German custody, they would only serve less than 2 months in prison before being let go. Palestinians would hijack a commercial flight from Germany that had 14 passengers, threatening to blow up the plane unless they got the release of the 3 terrorist members. Germany quickly obliged, and the terrorists were let go and transported to Libya. After their releasing, the 3 members did an interview in which they spoke about the terrorist act.
Did you expect to be freed so soon?
Of course, because I trust my friends and I was very sure that I will go free one day.
You were very confident that it would be within 2 months?
I don't know, maybe I think that it may be in 7 days, in 2 months, in 3 months. I don't care, but really I was very trust that my friend will send me free to our country.
Do you regret the death of the 11 Israelis?
Really, we want to kill that Israeli at that time because we want to get free our prisoners in Israeli prisons. So the Germans betrayed us, and they promised us, and they didn't did the promise.
Their motives and thoughts were also spoke on during the interview.
In the operation you were involved in Munich in the Olympic Games, 11 Israeli competitors died, 5 of your comrades died, and a policeman was killed. What now do you think of that operation?
Really, first I have to say why we did the operation in Mission. First of all, Germany helps Israel by the money and maybe by the weapon even, and by this weapon and this money, the Israeli kills the Arabs in Egypt, in Jordan, in Lebanon, in Syria, and every country they fight us. So German bring the Olympiad game to Germany to say that we are like we are peaceful men, but they really are not peaceful because they betrayed us and they help Israel.
But in many countries in Europe, you three are regarded as murderers and as killers.
Where?
In many countries in the world, you are regarded as murderers yourselves. How do you feel about that?
Really, Germans intend to appear us as a savage men, to show that the Palestinian or Arab people are savage. They are like monster or something like this.
Well, did you shoot any of the Israeli hostages?
It's not important to say if I killed Israel or not.
Do you think, looking back on it now, that you achieved anything in the Munich operation?
هل أثناء العملية هذه في اعتقادكم أنكم حققتم هدف لعملكم في ميونخ أم لا؟ حققتم يعني أي شيء؟ هدف؟
حققنا.
In English?
حققتوا هدف. Yes, they achieved something.
What do you think you achieved?
ما هو الهدف الذي حققتموه يعني في اعتقاد؟
معنى العالم صوتنا اللي كاد العالم ينسانا.
When we have made our voice heard by the world.
Are those your words?
هذا اعتقادكم أو تفكيركم أنتم
أيوة.
حضرة السادة. The same thinking. They have made their voice heard by the universe or the world who has not been hearing before.
Worse information regarding the actions of Germany in the aftermath of the event has been calling into question the handling of the crisis. George Sieber, the forensic psychologist who predicted the terrorist attack, was dismissed from his advisory role just hours after the incident occurred as part of a cover-up. And later, reports came that a Palestinian informant alerted Munich and the other countries that there was a plan to attack the 1972 Olympic Games. However, the information was ignored. Furthermore, other accusations have come out on how the Germans allegedly conspired and planned the hijacking of the commercial flight in order to let the Palestinian terrorists go free.
27 years later, in the Oscar-winning documentary One Day in September, it was revealed that Germany had colluded with al-Fatah in planning the hijacking of the plane in exchange for a promise not to carry out any more terrorist attacks on German soil. For 20 years, the German government insisted that no documents existed relating to its failures. But then in 1992, a German archivist smuggled a bulging folder to the wife of one of the Israeli victims. The number of files the Germans had been hiding was over 4,000, and horrible details emerged, that the athletes had been brutalized until their bones snapped, and that one of the Israeli victims was castrated in front of his teammates.
With the failures and debacles of the German government, there are still the families of the 11 slain Israeli athletes who have to mourn and grieve over this tragedy. The wife of Andre Spitzer, the fencing coach of Israel who was killed during the attack, shares her story.
I was only married 1 year and 3 months to Andre. We were a young couple, very much in love, with a small baby. You know, we were on top of the world. He was chosen to go to the Olympics, which for every athlete, that is the dream, you know. And I was in the room after they were murdered, just a few hours afterwards. And I looked around. Everything was with blood. The blood came down the stairs. It was on the ceiling. You know, they shot Romano in the room, so half of the room fell back into the room. And there was food all over. They didn't let them go to the bathroom. I was standing there and I said to myself, if human beings can do this to each other, when they have so much hatred in their heart, that even at the Olympic Village, the symbol of peace, you know, that they come and murder and torture the 11 people who were not their enemy, who did not have any weapons. They were not soldiers. They were just innocent sport people. And if they can do this, I will never shut up. I will never stop talking about it, only for one reason, so that this will never ever happen again.
The combination of politics and sport has always been a combative one, to say the least. However, there hasn't been an act on this scale ever in the history of sports. One of the most decorated and celebrated sports events all over the world was not only undermined, but taken control of, all for a political demonstration. With how horrid the crime was, the reaction and response from both the Olympic Committee and Germany only served to worsen the situation. The lives that were lost were innocent of any war crime or international wrongdoings, yet lost their life competing in the biggest competition in the world, which dumbfoundedly happened to have the least amount of security. Overall, security not just in sport, but in every walk of life has been ramped up significantly. And it's a good measure, because in the instance of international events, the politics will always have the potential to far outweigh the friendly competitiveness that sport strives for. Leagues, unions, committees, or even event organizers will continue to look at the tragic events of the 1972 Olympics, which was dubbed the Munich Massacre.